Hi, I'm Steve Adubato. More importantly, I want to introduce you to a very special guest. He's back for a second time as part of our three-part series. He is Rabbi Jack Bemporad. He is an internationally recognized theologian, scholar, interfaith advocate. This is a series we're doing in cooperation with the Ollendorff Center. And I'm going to say to you, Rabbi, that the first time we sat down with you and Stephen Ollendorff, it was very meaningful and powerful and profound for all of us. One of the things that came up toward the back end of that program, and I want to pick up that conversation here, we started talking about the 10 principles, if you will, of Judaism.
Yes.
Let's talk about some of them. And by the way, why are they so important for all of us, whether we are Jewish or not?
Well, I think that religion has a tendency of being scattered. In other words, the average person who is a minister or a rabbi, they're so busy doing so many things. They're all over the place, and they hear so many things. They talk about so many things. The important thing is to get back to what are the essential elements of a religion. It's easy to get carried away. It's easy to stress what may be really irrelevant. Sometimes I think about people being involved with irrelevant goodness. Irrelevant goodness. They're good in all kinds of ways, except ways that really make a difference in terms of leading a rational, ethical, spiritual life. So you need some way to focus on what is the really central core of a religion. And what we've tried to do with the 10 principles, and I hope those people who watch this program and see the Ollendorff Center, if they'll
see the website right now, they'll go on it.
They can go on that. They will get those principles with a commentary and everything. But what we tried to do was say, what are the really essential elements of Judaism? And what are the essential elements in many ways of all religion, because Judaism has been such a force in producing Christianity, Islam, and the Western world, it seems to me. So one of the things that we basically feel is so central is that a human being is more than just matter in motion, more than an animal, that he has the spark of the divine. And that spark of the divine connects him to something that transcends him, transcends that person, so that he can't just look at what's beneath him, he has to look at what is above, that he's part of something greater, that there's more than flesh and bones, as I say, that there's a spiritual force in things, and that somehow he should connect to that spiritual force. And the best way, according to Judaism, to do that is through rationality.
Rationality.
Why rationality? Because what we believe has to be credible. You have to say, yeah, this makes sense to me. This is the way things are. It has to be true. Truth is a really significant religious value. So the first thing, it has to be rational. Secondly, it has to be moral and ethical, because without ethics and morality, you don't have religion. It's sad that people seem to think that religion has nothing to do with ethics, but according to the prophets, according to Judaism, ethics is the real center of religion. How I relate to my fellow human being, whether I'm compassionate and caring, whether I'm able to put myself in his place or her place.
Empathize.
Empathize. You know, Hillel says that don't judge your fellow human being until you stand in his or her place. In other words, not only how does he feel or she feel, but with what eyes is he or she looking at me? Unless I can put myself in the other person's shoes, I don't have that core, that sense of connectedness, you see.
But Rabbi, let me push back here and say, or ask this question, in these very difficult economic times, what would you say to those who say, Rabbi, that sounds wonderful, that sounds beautiful, but I'm so busy, I'm so consumed by trying to keep my life together, put food on my family's table, you're asking me to try to empathize and think about someone else's world.
Where do you think the ideals of caring for the poor, the needy, the hungry, the orphan, the widow, the stranger, where does that come from? It comes from the Bible. One of the great things about this Pope Francis, is that he's saying just exactly that. He's saying, look, religion has to connect itself to the real, meaningful issues of life, which is, how do I relate to my fellow human being? How do I care for the stranger and the poor and the widow and the orphan? That's religion. Now, if a person
That's religion?
That is religion.
Someone says that's community service, you say?
No, that's not. That's, if you look, for example, at the prophets, Amos, Hosea, Micah, Jeremiah, Isaiah, they all speak about my commitment to my fellow human being. Religion has to do with the promises that I make, the promises I keep, and the promises I break. And what are the promises I make to myself, to my fellow human being, and to God? Which ones do I keep and which ones do I not? Now, it seems to me that the average person who's saying, look, I've got to have a life and I'm worrying about putting that, he's right. He has that worry.
Yes.
But unless he feels that he's connected to something that transcends him,
Bigger than he or she is.
bigger than he is, unless he feels that he lives according to certain principles, ethical principles, unless he feels that he's connected spiritually to others and to God, he's going to find that just putting bread on the table is not enough to satisfy him as a human being.
And what does that do? The cumulative effect of more people living like that, Rabbi, what is the cumulative effect on society as a whole?
I think it'll mean that we're going to be much more compassionate, we're going to be much more caring, and it will bring about a better society and a greater society.
Is that, in fact, by the way, one of the
That's
most,
essentially what Pope Francis is saying.
well, it's interesting. You're talking about Pope Francis, you know, the head of my church, if you will,
Yes.
and you're talking about the 10 principles of Judaism.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. This, when I talked to Stephen Ollendorff about this, and we started talking about doing this series, and I asked the question, well, so this is a conversation about Judaism. It's much more than that.
Yes.
And it's for people who happen not just to be Jewish.
Yes, I think that any really authentic engagement with ethics and rationality is ultimately Jewish.
Is ultimately
Jewish. And
Explain
if you look
that.
at, well, because I believe that if you were to look at where does the concept of a rational religion and where does the concept of an ethical religion come from, it comes from the Bible. And the Bible is the foundation for both the New Testament and the Quran. And in fact, all real transformation in Christianity, if you look at the history of Christianity, it's a return to the Bible, to the Hebrew Bible.
What about when things just happen? I mean, didn't Albert Einstein, this fascinating quote, a coincidence is God's way of being anonymous?
Yes.
Stuff happens.
Yeah, no, it doesn't just happen. What it means is that there's something beyond. There's some way that God organizes the world in such a way as to make things happen for the good. And we may think it's a coincidence. We may think, well, it just happens. But no, it's the way God operates in the world in a way that's subtle. It's the way of God's being subtle.
Even if we don't understand
We
what
may
that
not
is.
understand it, but if we look further, we will find that these connections involve a whole series of factors that means that we're in a world that's created, that's guided, and that is, in a sense, supported and recreated by God. And unless we know what our connection to God is, we're going to fail to understand what it means to be a human being.
And finally, I asked you this last time, I'm going to ask you again. I'm going to ask you in the third segment. By the way, it's a 3-part series we're doing in cooperation with the Ollendorff Center. And go on the website to see that previous program as well as programs going on, great initiatives at the center. Question, someone says, I can do all those things, Rabbi, without a connection to religion. You say?
Well, the reality is that I don't think that's true. I think if you do all those things, you're basically religious. Because what you're saying is, I'm doing all these things because I feel that by doing these things, I'm going to make the world better.
Yes.
Which means there's going to be a future. Which means there's an orderly universe where ethical action will make a difference. Well, how do I explain this orderly universe that ethical action will make a difference? I can't say it's matter blindly running. I can't say it's all chance. I have to say that there is a created, rational order to which I can contribute to and make it better. In this sense, I'm working with God. So I'm a co-creator with God. I'm not just doing what's right. And where did I get this idea of right? Where did I come across the idea of peace, for example, as being a noble ideal for all of us?
Didn't just happen.
No, it came from Isaiah, who says they should beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor accustom themselves to war anymore. Where did that come from? It came from Isaiah. It came from the Bible. It came from religious texts.
I am very glad we brought you in here, Rabbi, and we're very glad we're bringing you back for part 3.
My pleasure.
Rabbi Jack Bemporad, appreciate you joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Looking forward to the last segment. Stay with us. We're right back right after this.